17? 17b, yeah. So Gufa, we just mentioned when we were discussing going out the shorter way and doing a service in the temple, we mentioned the guy ran out, and as he ran out, he had his big pitchfork and he stirred the coals, he stoked the coals of the pyre, and it helped speed up the process. So on that statement, we're trying to figure out now, Gufa, Amar Rav Huna, Zar shehafak b'tzinor chayiv misa, a non-Kohen who goes and takes his fork and goes and stokes the coals, so he's liable for death. So what's the case? Hechidami, lo hafach lo ma'akle. Let's say if he did not stoke it, it would not have got consumed, meaning it would not have burnt well. So then, pshita, obviously he did something. He ended up cooking the food on the fire. If it wasn't going to go until he did it, then you don't need Rav Huna for that. That's obvious. And even without him stoking the coals, it would have consumed just fine, and it would have burnt just fine. So then, Mike oven. Then what did he do? He didn't do anything. So lo tzricha, you need it for a case. Di lo hafak bu ma'akle b'tarti shay. V'hashta ma'akle b'chad shayta. If not for him, it would have cooked in 2 hours. He sped up the process by stoking the coals, and it cooked in 1 hour. And the novelty is v'hakam ashvalon, the kol kruve avodahi. Any bringing closer of the temple service is also considered a service, meaning even though the service is called burning the food or burning the sacrifices, but you're speeding it up. Speeding it up is also considered part of working in the Beis Hamikdash. So it's not all or nothing. It's not if not for you, it wouldn't have happened. Then for sure you're liable. And if it would happen the same amount of time, then you really did nothing. But if it had taken 2 hours and you sped out the process to 1 hour, then you're going to be liable. Similar to also Shabbos, when you have cooking. So cooking, even stirring, called megas, stirring speeds up the cooking process. You're not allowed to stir the food when it's on the fire either, because that's speeding up the process. That's a problem. So it's a similar idea. And the novelty is that that's also considered a service of the temple to speed up this process, and therefore a non-Kohen will be liable for doing this service like he's liable for doing any other service. Okay. Amar of Oshia. Rav Oshia said, but I wanted to say something, but I was scared of my friends. But don't worry, he said it anyways. So hanichnas lebeis hamenuga derech achora. So we know that sometimes a house can become have tzaras in the house, right? And if it has that, anybody leprosy, I guess. I don't like the word leprosy, so I like the word tzaras. So it has tzaras. So we know that if anything found inside is going to be now impure. So what happens if you walk in the house backwards? Yeah, you had color war, whatever it was, really racist, and you walked in backwards. So hanichnas lebeis hamenuga derech achorav va'afilu kulo. And almost 99% of your body, except for your nose. Except for your nose, you are going to be tahor.
You have big noses?
That's right. This is one of the many sources. So you are going to be pure, not impure. You're going to be pure, even though most of your body is in the house that is full of tzaras. Dichsiv, as the verse says, v'abal abayis. So it says, you come into the house. So derech bia asra Torah, coming in means coming in the normal way, the way you enter the house. Walking in backwards, believe it or not, is not the normal way you walk into a house, even on Purim. No, I don't know about Purim, but derech bia asra Torah. Okay, so that's what he said. That's his novelty. When it says you go into the house, it means you go in the normal way, not backwards. Okay, now what was he scared of? Why was he scared? Why was he scared of his friends, of his colleagues to say this? Ihachi, so then kulonami. So then, well, if it says you have to go in, you have to enter, so then as long as you walk in backwards, why does it have to be that your nose is still outside? Let your entire body enter, walking backwards all the way. You should still remain pure because you did not fully enter, because you did not enter in the proper way of entering. So, Amarav, no. Kulo lo gara mikelim shebabayis. Well, you walking in backwards and finding yourself fully inside the house is no different than any vessel found inside the house. So just like a vessel that's found inside the house, we don't care how the vessel got there. So to you that's fully inside the house, we don't care how you got there. However, that anything in the house is going to be pure, is going to become impure. So you shouldn't impurify the things inside the house. So basically, it's going to be three things over here. Walking into the house the normal way, even if part of your body is on the outside of the house, but if most of your body is inside the house, then you say the concept that the majority is considered like the whole thing, rubo kikulo. That since the majority of your body is inside the house, then you're going to be impure. That's if you walk in the normal way. If you walk in backwards, so then if your nose remains outside, we don't say this idea of rubo kikulo, that it's like, well, since most of your body's in the house, it's like your full body's in the house. Nope. That you have an exemption, or you get to remain pure because you didn't walk in the normal way. However, if you walk in fully backwards, so then you're no worse than any vessel that's found inside the house, and therefore you're going to remain impure.
That means if you walk your shoe backwards, it means you didn't walk.
It means you're skilled and talented. Yeah. So that's so that was his novelty, and that was why he was a little bit scared. But Rava helped him out. Okay. A similar, this is like similar to what you're saying about walking the shul, yeah. A similar brisa. Gagin halalu. So the get a picture, I guess, but there's a certain the balconies, the roofs of the Beis Hamikdash, so they weren't officially sanctified. Ein ochlin sham kacha kadashim. You can't eat there the holy sacrifices because that area is not officially holy. Only the ground and the airspace is holy. The ein shochtin sham kachim kalam, and you can't slaughter there kachim kalam, less holy sacrifices. V'tamei shenichnas derech gagin leheichal pater, and a impure person who walks into the holy area, but he walks from the roof and not from the entrance. So he is pater, even though he is impure. If he walks into the heichal, but through the roof area, you're exempt. Why? Shinamar el hamikdash lo savo. You should not enter into the Beis Hamikdash when you're in a state of impurity. Same word. Derech bia asr Torah. You have to walk in the normal way and not walk in through the roof way. So
that's why they did the maintenance for the Kodesh Kodeshim, but coming in from the top.
Oh, good. Yeah.
Don't say cherry pickers. They also had cherry pickers.
Oh. Yeah. Yeah, I heard that. The roof of a shul. We know a shul itself has sanctity to it, so it has certain rules you have to abide by when you're in the shul, right? So, what about the roof of a shul? That's something I heard that was interesting. Does you want to do work on the roof of a shul? So it sounds like it's not. It doesn't have that level of holiness. But some say to publicly, that there's a question about drying your clothing. Someone lives on top of the shul like it is, what you can imagine, very close together. So can you dry your clothing, on top of a shul? So it doesn't have holiness, but maybe it's not proper to do that in a public way. It's still a synagogue. Okay. So until now ends the PG part, and now comes the non-PG part. Okay. So we had this a little bit interesting statement in the Mishnah that we started comparing the Mikdash to a Nida. So it says, Zuhi mitzvah seishim mikdash she'ein chayven Allah. This was the positive commandment that you are not liable for, and which positive commandment are you liable for? That we said was a nida. Yeah. Right. We said this is a positive commandment in the mikdash that you're not liable for in terms of coming in when you are coming in impure, right? If you leave the shorter way, then you're not going to be liable. And then we said the ezu mitzvah seisha benida that you are chayav for. And what's a positive commandment of when it comes to hilchos nida that you're liable for? And it's that we said that if you're having relations with a woman and she starts to bleed and she says I'm impure, so if you leave right away, then you're going to be liable. So on that, the Gemara asks, like, what's this doing here, basically? Heichi kai de ka'amar zuhi. Like, it sounds like you had something that you're talking about before, and then all of a sudden, and then all of a sudden you came for a good time. So all of a sudden you were talking about something earlier, and then you say zuhi. So it says the Gemara, heicha kai de ka'amar zuhi. So it says the Gemara, hasam kai. We're referring to horios. So the mission horios says a whole beginning. Ein chayavin ala seiv alos hasei shemamikdash. So the mission there says that you're not liable. Bezdin is referring to Bezdin. Bezdin is not liable, right? We know that if the court makes an erroneous ruling that most of the Jewish people follow, so they have to bring a korban. However, when it comes to tumah, when it comes to impurity, like the case that we've been talking about, there you don't bring a korban chatas. You bring only a korban ola v'yored. You bring a variable offering. So for that, if the Bezdin rules erroneously in that area, then they're not liable their usual sacrifice, like they usually have to bring if they make an error inadvertently in another area. So, ein chayavin ala seiv alos hasei shemamikdash. So these positive and negative commandments of don't come in impure and you should leave. So and you should leave right away. That you don't bring a korban chatas for. So those they're not going to be liable if they make an erroneous ruling. The ein mevin asham talui al asay v'al los asay. And now a regular person that is not a regular person who's not sure, were they impure in the temple, were they not impure in the temple? So usually if you're not sure about something which you're liable kares for, so that instead of bringing a korban chatas, a sin offering, you bring a korban asham talui, a guilt offering that's, so to speak, hanging in the balance because it's we're not sure if you did something wrong or did not do something wrong. But since in these cases you're liable a variable offering, so therefore if you're not sure about one of these cases where you have to bring a variable offering, you don't bring an asham talui for a variable offering that you're not sure about. Okay, and then it says aval chayavin al asay v'alos asay shebenida. Then it says you are liable. You are liable for, as opposed to before where you're not liable. You are liable for violating a positive and a negative commandment when being with a nida, meaning the case is that that let's say you're an one, so to speak, that when you started having relations with her, she was pure, and all of a sudden she became impure. So now you have a commandment to have to get out of there. So for that, if you violate that, then you are liable to bring an offering. Yeah. Umevin asham tali ala seiv alos asay. And because this is already a private matter, so for this you would bring, I guess in this case, I don't know, what would be the asham talui? You're not sure. I guess, yeah, you're not sure. Did she bleed? Did she not bleed? You're not sure if you did something wrong. So since that's a chayiv kares, since that's a kares offering, so for that you'd be liable in asham talui.
This is happening in the Beit HaMikdash.
No, the need is happening in the confines of your own home. Yeah, yeah.
Well, you never know.
That's true, but yeah, no. It's just comparing the two. That since we have cases that are similar to not knowing, and you weren't sure you were impure, and there are certain sacrifices you bring and you don't bring. So comparing that to also another case where you know or you don't know, so to speak, that like Anita case, that's a similar. The circumstances are similar in terms of you start off nothing wrong, and all of a sudden, oh my gosh, I'm impure. Now you're impure by walking to the temple and getting. Oh, we're going to talk about that. Yeah, very good. Like, what's the case exactly? If you knew that, yeah, go. So in that case, you would be liable a sacrifice for being with Anita. So yeah, the Ka'amar, and we say Zuhi mitzvah seishu b'mikdash. This is the positive commandment of basically get out of the base of Mikdash if you find yourself to be impure. She'ein chayvin aleha, right? If you take the shorter route, then you're not going to be liable. The Ezuhi mitzvah seishu b'nida. But what is the positive commandment that you are liable for a sacrifice? That's hayam shamish imatahora. You're having relations with a lady who's pure. She says, I'm impure. Upiresh miyad. If right away you exit, so then you are liable. because as we're going to speak about at length, that as long as you're still still in a state where you are erect, so when you leave, it's the same pleasure. It's also considered like having relations. It's the same pleasure coming in, coming out, and for that you're going to be liable. Yeah. Okay. Itmar. So now on this we have an Emoraic statement. Abai Amar Mishmeder of Chia Barav Chayiv Shtayim. And this we're going to talk about. You're liable to one who enters, one who exits. You're liable to. Now he's talking about being liable as sacrifice, right?
Yes.
Yeah, sacrifice. So that's going to be the name of the game. You're liable to sacrifice. So somehow you did it inadvertently. If you do it inadvertently, you're chayiv kares. So that's a done deal, right? So somehow, if you totally had no idea of anything, you entered, you exit, you know nothing, okay, then you're an onus. It's totally unavoidable. But we need to find a way that somehow you're liable to, in the beginning and at the end, you were considered a shogeg to make yourself liable to sacrifices. Yeah? You came in a good day, right? Oh, we're going to talk about that too. Yeah, don't worry. So, if any case is not discussed at the end, I'll be shocked. so that's right. Yeah, 2 is always 4. So the question is if it's 8 or 16. Yeah. So okay, Itmar Abaya. For some reason, this always gets more excitement. Yeah, Itmar Abaya. Itmar Abaya Mar Meshvei Derochia Bar Rav Chayiv Shtayim. V'chein Amarava Rav Agristam Amarav Shmuel Bar Shaba Amarav Huna. In the name of Huna Chayiv Shtayim. Okay, you're liable to Chada Knisa, one on entering, V'chada Prisha, and one on exiting. Okay, so pops up Rabbah, like all of us. Habiba Rabbah, well, b'mai. What's the case? You're making a statement. Explain to me the case, please. So, Ilema, like Jules was saying, Samach Levesta, it's near the time. She's every month she sees. She's been seeing on day number 29, 30, 31, whatever it is, on the 4th of the month. So that 4th of the month, she's been seeing the last few months. So therefore, you have to separate when it's close to that time. Mm-hmm. So Ilema Samuch Levesta. So now, if that's the case, that it's close to the time, so therefore, if it's close to the time, you can't say that entering is totally unavoidable because you should have known. Yeah. But he's still not amazed at it because she wasn't bleeding right now. Mm-hmm. So if that's true, if we're talking about it's close to the time, so it's no longer an unavoidable accident, you should have stopped yourself. Ubemat, well, what's the case? If it's someone who knows the rules, he knows that when she says nitmesi, I'm now impure, I'm bleeding, he knows that he should not exit right away. So then for that exit, he's not considered an inadvertent act. It's advertent act. That's on purpose. That's a advertent act. So even b'tamid chacham. So now bishlama knisa. Okay, for entering, maybe you'll say he's a shogeg. He thought he could, go in, go out. But kasavar yicholni livel. He thought I could do it. So ella aprisha amay lechayev mezidhu. He knows the law. The law is when she says I'm bleeding, don't get out right away. You have to wait. We'll see more about that too. So what to do? What's the exit strategy? So if they have an exit strategy. So amay lechayev, yeah, like the base of Mikdash, you have to know what to do. So lechayev mezidhu, that's considered a mezid. So that can't be the case. Okay, go to the other extreme. Viba am haaretz, someone who doesn't know the laws, right? He missed this day of Daf Yomi. He doesn't know the laws. So then that's just let's say you eat 2 olive worths of forbidden fats in 1 lapse. You just didn't know that this is forbidden. Then you found out, you're like, oh my gosh, I had 2 olive worths. But that's in 1 lapse. So you're only liable 1, not 2. It's only in 1 lapse. So to hear the guy didn't know, so you're only liable 1 for entering and exiting, not liable 2. So, okay. So the elabish ain samach levesta, like Jared said, maybe it's not close to the time. Well, if it's not close to the time that she's having her period, so ubeman, what's the case? Ilema b'talmid chacham, if he knows the law, so v'lo chada lo mechayev, then he's not even liable 1. How's he liable? Entering, totally unavoidable. She never gets a period. She always gets a period at the 20th of the month, and now it's day 3. Like, what's the? So that's for sure he's fine. And then what happened? She started bleeding. So then he knows the law. He's knowledgeable. So then if he leaves right now, he's amazed. So then you're liable 0 sacrifices. So a knisa anus, a prisha amazed. Iba ama aretz, if he doesn't know anything, so chadahu de mechayev. So then maybe if he doesn't know the laws, so maybe on entering he's for sure not liable. But a prisha of on exiting he should have he should have known on exiting that was inadvertent avera. So for that he'll be liable. That's only liable 1 and not 2. Okay. So now Hadar Amar Rava. So now Rava says like this: La'olam b'samach levesta. It is close to the time where she usually gets her period. Okay. And and he knows the rule. However, he's a Talmud Chacham for certain areas, but not for other areas. Yeah. So the Talmud Chacham lazu, the Ein Talmud Chacham lazu. So meaning he knows that the Jews have to stay away from their wives close to their period. However, he didn't know. It's interesting. Some people have this, right? But he didn't know that when she bleeds, that you have to wait and you can't leave right away. So for that, it's considered a shogeg. So Rashi explains, in the beginning when he entered, he really shouldn't have, but he thought he could do it. So for that, that's considered a shogeg. And on the prisha, on the exiting, he thought it was permitted. So that's going to be two cases of where that's where he'll be liable both. Rashi points out, it's interesting, thinking that you could, even though she's close to her period, that you could do it is not called an unavoidable accident. It's called a shogeg. He thought, I could do it. I could get it in before the right time. Maybe he's going on a trip somewhere. Who knows? So, And then once she said, now I'm bleeding, so now he knew. Now he knows that on that entrance, he made a mistake. So that's already called a yediyah. A yediyah meaning he knows now that he did something wrong, right? Because if he doesn't know he did anything wrong, then you're only liable 1 sacrifice. The second she says, I'm bleeding, he's like, oh no, on my entrance, I'm liable. So then that's 1. And now when he exits right away, he thought that was permitted. So that's going to be 2. So for that, you'll be liable to 2 sacrifices. Now Rashi asks, which is could be bothering some people, that if you know it's close to her period, and we're supposed to separate ourselves close to the period, so why is that not called a mazid? That's called an advertent act. Why is it called inadvertent act? So Rashi says because since there's no chiyuv kares, there's no kares punishment, and there's no sin sacrifice on having relations close to her period. So and he thought he could get in and get out in time, so that's not considered a mazid. It's interesting. It's not considered a mazid. Yeah, novel to me. Okay, fine. Okay, we still have time. Good. So I won't make that mistake twice. I'm finishing 13 minutes early. Yeah. So start 13 minutes late, but I got to finish 13 minutes early. So Amar Rava. So now, what are the sources for both of these things? So Abai said in the name of Chia, and Rava agreed to him, you're liable 2. Okay. So now, where does it say you're liable for each one of these things? So Amar Rava v'Travayu Taninu. Don't worry, both are taught. Knisa Tanina, entering when you're not supposed to, and exiting when you're not supposed to. Prisha Tanina, they're both taught. So Prisha Tanina, exiting, was what we just said. Our Mishnah on Yudalim Beis said, "Dikatani haya mishamish yimatahora." If you have relations with a lady who's pure, the Amrlo nitmesi, and she says, "I'm impure." Upirish miyad, and you say, and upirish miyad, and you exit right away. Chayiv, you're liable. Our Mishnah, easy. Knisa. What about entering? So it's kind of a little more complicated. So we're traveling over to Nida a little bit. Nimtza al shalo tmeyin v'chayavin b'korban. So we're going to see that they used to check themselves after relations because they wanted to know if they're bleeding in terms of can they eat sacrificial foods. So he used to wipe himself and she used to wipe herself. So now nimtza al shalo, on his cloth, what did he find? He found blood. He found blood. Tmein. So they're both tamei. V'chayavin bekorban, and they're liable to bring a korban. Now, what's this case? So right now we're saying ma'ilav. Are we not talking about where it's a case of samuch levesta, where it's near the time where she's going to have her period and he should not have had relations with her? The aknisa, and on the original entering, that's when they had relations. Meaning he's liable for that because we are assuming now that it was samuch levestos. That means she's going to have her period, and therefore the aknisa. The aknisa that he's going to bring a korban for entering. He shouldn't have entered if it's close to the time where she got her period. And yeah, and the assumption now is that if he finds blood right afterwards, so it really means that he really had relations. We can assume he had relations with a lady who was a nida, and therefore she's impure because she's a nida, and he's impure because he had relations with a nida. So because we assume for sure there was blood beforehand, or as they're having relations, there's blood there too. So if that's true, that's what that Mishnah is talking about, then that's a Mishnah that says you're liable a korban for entering at a time that you weren't supposed to. So Amr Rav Adabar Masna L'Rava. No, it's not a proof. La'olam Eimalach b'shalo samach levesta. It's really where he entered when it was not near the time of her period. Ve'aprisha, and it's talking about when you exited and not when you entered. So says the Gemara v'chitema prisha lamali hatanale. So you're having a Mishnah in Nida teach me the same halacha that a Mishnah in Shavuot taught me, that a person is liable for exiting if his wife if his wife starts bleeding. So we taught that already in Shavuot. So why are you teaching me the same thing twice? Says the one, you're right. I don't really need it for that case, but it's because the beginning case I need. So we're just going to parallel the first case in that Mishnah. The following case. Nimta al shalah tmeim b'safek upturim in a korban. So there the Mishnah differentiates when did she find blood on her. If she checked right away and found blood, so then yes, we assume that she's tamei right now because she's a nida. However, if sometime later she checked and she ended up finding blood, so now she's in doubt. Maybe it came from the fact that she was a nida, maybe not. So that's where it's nimsa al shalah tmeim b'safek. It's going to be a case of a doubt. Upturin min a korban. And you are pater from a korban. You are going to be exempt from a korban. So once it brought that case, it just finished off. It just taught the case at the end. Tananami nimsa al shalo. Therefore, you can't ask me a question. It taught the same thing twice already. I'm agreeing with you. That last part wasn't really so necessary, but for the sake of the memorizing of the Mishnayos, it's easier when you parallel the cases like that. So we taught the end on the way we did. Okay. On this idea that this Mishnah is talking about, where she's not near at the time of her period, and it's where she exited and not entered, that's what you're talking about, when it wasn't near to her period, and he exited. But it says, blood was found. It sounds like blood was found, meaning after the fact, there was blood that was found. It was after the fact. The word nimtza, to be found, implies afterwards you found out, right? Afterwards you found out that there was blood. So, okay, so what's wrong with that? The aprisha, if really she was bleeding, and we're talking about a case where he's liable for exiting, so then the aprisha miikara, ki parishla miikara habla yediyah. So if we're talking about where he exited, so that means that he there was blood there originally, and he knew about it, Now the word nimtza, you found out that there was blood. Sounds like at the time you didn't know. But if we're talking about a case where he exited and that's what he did wrong, so she said, I'm bleeding. So it's not I found out that there was blood. right now there's blood. She told you, I'm bleeding. So the language of the Mishnah of find out there was blood implies they had relations. And afterwards, when he cleaned himself, he found that there was blood. So his problem was that he entered at a time that he should have separated. That was his problem. That it turns out there was blood. But if it's talking about exiting, so then you didn't find out there's blood. Right now, she said, I'm bleeding. So, yeah. So, Amar Le Rava. So, Amar Le Rava. So Rava says, you should listen to what your Rebbe told you. Because, so Amar Le Heichi Matzis, Heichi. So he said, what do you mean? What should I listen to? It says, the Tanya, the Brisa says on that Mishnah in Nida, the Tanya Allah, Zuhi mitzvah seisha benida, shechayavan aleha. There is a positive commandment of a Nida that you're liable for. Now, yeah. So now, there's going to be two, right? There's a negative commandment that you should abstain from your wife when she's close to her period, and then there's a positive commandment of when you're there and she's bleeding, get out, right? Now that Mishnah, the Brisa says, similar to our Mishnah, Zuhi mitzvah aseisha benida shechayav aleha. This is a positive commandment regarding a nida that you're liable for. Now, the im isa, if you're right that it's referring to entering and not exiting, well, entering at the wrong time, which is going to have her period, is not a positive commandment. It's a negative commandment. You should abstain from her. It's telling you don't do. So, but if it's talking about where you're exiting, there's a positive commandment. Get out, right? So that the fact that it says on that Mishnah that it's a positive commandment very, very strongly implies that we're talking about that he did something wrong by exiting, not by entering. And if you're right, then it should say that it's a mitzvah lo saseh. It's a negative commandment, not a positive commandment. So to that he responds, basically, you're right. The Mishnah, the Brisa is missing a few words. Amrle I tenisa chaser v'tani hachi. So he said, if there is such a Brisa, then you have to amend it to teach the following. V'tani hachi zui mitzvah lo saseh shevanida. There is a negative commandment of Anida, meaning don't have relations with her at the time of her period, near her period time. Shechayav aleha. However, then you have to add in, but if you're already having relations and she's in a state of purity, and then she says, V'amar lo nitmeisi, now I'm in a state of impurity, she started bleeding, upiresh miyad, and you exited right away, chayiv. And that's what it says in the Brisa, and that's the mitzvah seisha benida, to get out as to get out of there when she's bleeding. So at the end of the day, he stays strong, and he says, and he holds that Mishnah and Nida is talking about where you are entering at a time you're not supposed to. And even though we challenged it by trying to prove from the language and from the Brisa, however, he seems to remain steady that it's referring to entering. Yeah. Okay. So Amar Mar, back to this idea of exiting when she says I'm bleeding. Amar Mar piresh miyad chayiv. If you exit right away, you're chayiv. So hey chiyavin, what should I do? So Amar Rav Huna mishmei de Rava, no wait eser tzipornav. You should put your 10 fingernails, your 10 fingers, bikarka, achiyavos v'tovya, and you should put it in the ground until that part of the body, so to speak, dies, meaning it stops being hard. V'tovya, and that's good. Now, simply understood, it's just a practical strategy to do that. But behind it is you should try to focus on something else to get yourself out of that state of mind to enable yourself to exit without violating the Isser. I'm pretty sure this is what the Gemara says by Yosef Atzadik, that when Yosef was with the daughter of Potiphar, with the wife of Potiphar, so he almost had relations with her. And I think the Gemara says he put his 10 fingers into the ground and semen came out of his fingers. Whatever that means. I don't know what that means, but it's interesting. The same, it was a parallel in my head. Yeah, if it's right. So, if not, then I made it up. So, no, I think it's right. So now, Amarava. So this is interesting, right? All these details, yeah, getting out, the whole thing. So now, can you apply this? Can we take a general rule out of here? Amarava zos omeris hamishamish meis ba'arayos pater. Well, what we're basically saying is, as long as that part of the body is not erect anymore, so then exiting you're exempt for. There's no prohibition. Okay, so what if one has relations with someone that they're not allowed to have in that same state? Is that prohibited or is that not prohibited? It's definitely not advised. But a person wants a relation with his sister, I don't know, his mother. Yeah, whatever, some crazy case. But he's not in a state, but he's not erect. It's, so to speak, dead. So can you learn from there? Can you learn from there that you're exempt? Because we just learned that exiting in that state, you're not liable for. So it sounds like that's not considered having relations. So then if you do that with someone you're not allowed to, then you'll also be exempt. So these sakadai chayiv, if you want to say that you are, liable, so hachamai time a putter. If you're liable over there, so then why are you exempt over here? So if you're liable over there, so then why are you exempt over? Make up your mind. Is this called having relations or not? If it's called yes, having relations, then how does it help you when she says I'm bleeding? Hachamai time a putter. Says the Gemara, mishum da anasu. Well, what are you supposed to do? You can't say that forever. So says the Gemara, if that's true, anasu, if all being found in that situation is an unavoidable situation, so then why does it matter if you get out right away or not? Once getting out, being in the situation is unavoidable, and therefore getting out you're not going to be liable for. So then you shouldn't be liable whether you wait or you don't wait. Right away you can get out also, and you should not be liable. So anasu kipirish miyad. Kipirish miyad nami nifter. You should be exempt for leaving right away. Kipirish miyad nami nifter anasu. You should be exempt. You're considered an anus. So Amar le Abaye. No, like this. If you have relations in that same state of non-erection with someone you're not allowed to have relations with, then you are going to be liable. That's not allowed. The hacha my taima, and here the hacha my taima pater. Why are you exempt over here? Mishum the anus, because you are an ones. All of a sudden she's bleeding. Who v'had amris kipirish miyad amay chayiv, and that which you told me, you asked me if that's true. If I exit right away, so then why am I liable? It's unavoidable. I should be exempt. Shahaylo lifrosh behanamu etes upirish behanamu. You had two choices. You could have left with a lesser pleasure or more pleasure, and you chose to leave with more pleasure. For that you are liable. It's interesting, how does it apply practically, other than whatever, yeah. But it's interesting. I heard an interesting example of this, that a person has to drink on Yom Kippur. Whatever the case is, diabetic, I don't know, he's sick, right? He has two choices, water or orange juice, right? So he's allowed to drink. He has to drink. It's life-threatening. So what do? You could have thought, as long as you drink the minimal requirement, then it's fine, right? Whatever you let. They say, no, you should have the water and not the orange juice. Because if you can have two things, you should avoid the one that's more enjoyable. Because Yom Kippur, the prohibition, you can't have enjoyment in that area. You can't have drinking. So that's they bring this Gemara as an example of that. That you have two choices here: less enjoyment, more enjoyment. You're going to be liable if you take the more enjoyable route than the less enjoyable route. Stop here.
Gary, I think he disconnected.
What? It's over.